Okay, so this is what we're going to do today. I'll give you some course information very briefly. We'll talk about adjectives, and all the content of today's lesson comes from Module 4 in your book. I'll show you which book I have made. So adjectives and different kinds of adjectives, order of adjectives, comparisons of adjectives, and comparative structures. So we'll talk about these 4 chapters today. As you probably realize, this is the lecture, the work-relation. Tomorrow, probably, not all of you tomorrow. Okay, at another moment you have someone else for a tutorial with work-relation. Right, so what is this course about? We'll talk about grammar, grammatical items we call them. So grammatical items are nouns, adjectives, tenses, the present perfect, present simple, past simple, etc. We want you to be able to use these items correctly, so you can apply them in your own languages as well. So you learn 2 things really here. What you learn is the rules for the grammar, but also how to apply that in your own languages. So there's always a link to language skills. Most importantly, probably here, is that you can explain what you do. Many of you can actually have some idea of what to do and what not to do, which may be correct or incorrect, but most of you probably don't know how to explain it. That's the more difficult part. So don't trust your intuition in this course. You'll need to, you need to be able to explain everything that you do. Yeah, if you can't explain what you do, then you might get it wrong. The course is blocks 2 and 3, and carries 3 study points, 3 credits, and this is the book that you need. If you don't have it, buy it as soon as possible, because otherwise you can't do the exercises. There's a copy in the library. If you can't do the exercises, then it becomes very hard to keep up the work and pass the test. If you keep up the work, do the exercises every week, I think you should be okay. Okay, this is a lot. This is what we're going to do in 2 blocks. So, irregular verbs. Well, most of you know irregular verbs already. We're not going to talk about them in detail. Basically, what we want you is just to learn them by heart, if you don't know them by heart already. So make sure you study the irregular verbs. The tenses, that's a main part of this course, a big part, the tenses. So the tenses is the verb forms. I work versus I am working, I have been working, I will have been working, I will have worked, etc. Conditionals, if sentences, a noun, adjective, adverb, comparatives, that's today. Articles, demonstrative pronouns, numerals, and the possessive. And these are all smaller bits. And there's a test at the end of block 3. If you don't pass it, there's a reset in block 4. Now, because this course is 2 blocks, it's quite tempting to stop studying and come into classes either at the end of block 2 or at the beginning of block 3. Usually that's what happens. People come to my classes and then block 2 and I think it's going really well, and then in block 3 suddenly no one turns up anymore. And then those people probably fail the test. So don't lose concentration, don't lose motivation, and if you do, then just make sure you don't. Yeah, so the course is 2 blocks, which means it's easy to lose your motivation. You just keep doing the work. If the test is a long way ahead, it's tempting to think, I can do this at a later moment. But if you don't keep up the work, it's going to be more and more difficult. So just keep up the work, keep coming, and you should be okay. Right. So I've given you the course information. Let's talk about adjectives, different kinds of adjectives now. So here are some phrases. A small green book, a small and green book, a blue red flag, a blue and red flag, interesting funny movie, an interesting and funny movie. Some are correct and some are incorrect. Just to get you going, I'd like you to look at these phrases and think about which ones are correct and which ones are incorrect. And can you think of an explanation? It might not be the right explanation, but that's okay. Can you think of an explanation for why something is correct or incorrect? Let's look at the answers. The small green book, correct or incorrect? This is correct. The small and green book, wrong. Does anyone have any idea why? Darcy?
Because the two adjectives aren't from the same group. So for instance, for the third sentence phrase, it says blue, red flag. Those adjectives are from the same group as in colors. And when they're from the same group, you put and in between. So a blue, red flag isn't really something, and a blue and red flag.
Excellent. Did you read your book?
Sorry?
Did you read the book?
No, I don't have the book.
Okay, so you're probably the only person who doesn't need it then. No, I'm joking. Very good. Another remark there?
A small and green book kind of lies in fruit.
Sorry, I can't hear what you
I
say.
mean, there's a small and green book. We're talking about a book that's small and a green book that's
Yeah, but in modern English, as we know it today, we can't say a small and green book. We say a small book and a green book. In the 17th century, that was normal English to say that. Yeah. Or a green book and the small. That's what you could say, but not anymore. Darcy's explanation was correct. I'm going to repeat that in a minute. First of all, we don't usually use and between adjectives, but there's an exception there. A blue red flag here is wrong, and a blue and red flag here is correct. Why? Because if both adjectives describe the same quality, we say, describe the same kind of thing, in this case colours, then we put and in between. Yeah, so a blue red flag is wrong. A blue and red flag. And so you see, an interesting funny movie is incorrect, and an interesting and funny movie is correct. Why? Because these two adjectives, sorry, I'm standing in front of the, describe similar qualities. And quality means, what are you saying about a noun? Yeah. Quality doesn't just mean whether something is good or not. That's the usual meaning of quality. In grammar, quality also means the description. So a quality of this movie is that it's funny, and a quality of the flag is that it's red and that it's blue. If the adjectives describe the same quality, namely colour or interesting and funny, what kind of quality would that be?
Personality?
Sorry?
Personal.
Yeah, personal opinion or how appealing it is or something, yeah. Then we use and. If in your intuition you should somehow have a feeling, even though you didn't know the rule, that interesting funny movie is incorrect. If this doesn't happen, then it still needs to enter into your brains. That's the thing with grammar. Mostly you learn grammar by listening to English, by reading English, by repeating what you hear, etc. And then you learn grammar unconsciously, as it were. That's how it works, right? That's why most of what you do at secondary school is, or what you should do at secondary school, is talk in English to your students and have them listen to stuff and have them read, rather than teach grammar lessons all the time. They are important. But more important is that you actually listen and read and write. So it sort of happens unconsciously. Sometimes if people don't know something, like if for you it's new, if it's new to you that you can't say an interesting, funny movie, then this lesson is important for you, because then you need to learn this by heart and make sure it enters into your brain somehow by writing it, by saying it, by practicing it, etc. Okay. But if your intuition already said an interesting, funny movie is wrong, then now you know the rule. That's important. Yeah?
Could you, instead of and, also use a comma?
No. No.
Why?
Why? An interesting, funny movie. I'll come back to the question. I need to think about it. Yeah? Okay. Here's another exercise. Which of the following sentences are correct? Explain your answer. Let's look at the answers. She looks beautiful. This is correct, nothing wrong with that, right? She eats slow. X. This is incorrect. Why? We can use adjectives after copulate, but not after lexical verbs. What should it be? She eats slowly. So slowly then is an adverb. Look is a copula, remember? You can replace it by is. She is beautiful. She eats slow. Eats is an action verb, a lexical verb. So this you can't put an adjective after a lexical verb. You need an adverb. She eats slowly. The book was small green is, of course, wrong. The book was small and green is correct. Why? Not only do these describe, no, that's not right. These do describe different qualities, right? Small is different from green, so you'd expect there to be no and between small and green. So if you'd say a small green book, that would be correct. You wouldn't say a small and green book. But if you put these adjectives after the verb, after the noun, sorry, then you need and. You do need and. Yeah? So if small and green come before book, then there's no and. Small green book. If they come after book, the book was small and green, you include and in between.
Yeah. That's supposed to be noun instead of verb.
Well, actually, if you put it after a noun, then you also put it after a verb. Yeah. I've got to make a correction to what I said earlier. Someone, who was it, who asked a question about commas? The answer was yes, you can. You can replace the word and by a comma. Yeah.
Is there an exception for this?
I'm no good at exceptions.
Alright.
I'm not sure if there's an exception. I'd have to come across it. Yeah? They are afraid dogs. This is of course incorrect. But why? We have to say the dogs are afraid. What can you say instead of they are afraid dogs, if you want to use a different word there? They're afraid of dogs. Now, if you want to say that the dogs are afraid, bange honden, right? How can you say that? Yeah? Scared dogs or frightened dogs. Yeah, but not afraid somehow. We have to say the dogs are afraid. Alive, afraid, alone, asleep, and awake. These 5 adjectives cannot be used before a noun. They come after a verb. So we don't say the alive dogs, we say the dogs are alive. We don't say the asleep dogs, or the alone dogs, or the awake dogs. All these verbs come after the noun. The dogs are alive, are afraid, are alone, are asleep, are awake. So if you want to say the wakkere honden, then you'd have to use a different adjective from awake. Then you'd have to say the waking dogs or something else. Yeah. Just think about that. Wakkere in English. Awakened. Ontwaakte. Yeah. I'm going to introduce a term to you which is not on the screen. Do I have a marker? Let me see. Where's my bag? This is the difference between, and this is not a term you need to know for the test, but it's good to know this. Adjectives can be predicative or attributive. Attributive means they come before the noun. Predicative means they come after the noun. So, the beautiful dog includes a attributive adjective. Beautiful is an attributive adjective. Afraid is a predicative adjective. The dogs are afraid. You can't put it in front of a noun. Yeah? So this is not something you need to know for the test, but it's good to know the terms anyway. Sorry? Attributive adjectives are before the noun, come before the noun. Predicative adjectives come after the noun. Most adjectives I can hear quite a few people talk. Most adjectives can be either predicative or attributive. For example, small, the small book, or the book was small. If you say the small book, then small is an attributive adjective. If you say the book was small, then small is a predicative adjective. Yeah? Again, there's not essential information to know for the test, but it's important to know these things if you're studying grammar. Okay, any questions? Let's move on then. Another exercise, what's the difference between the underlined words? Confused people and confusing proposal, etc. I saw a question from Darcy.
That was a question. I was
You want to give the answer?
maybe.
Well, you can have a go.
I think the first part.
Can we listen, please? Yeah.
The first part, so confused people, frightened boy. I think it's direct, and the second part is indirect.
What do you mean by direct and indirect?
Confused people says something about the noun, there. And in the second row, it displays a result of something.
But it also says something about the noun, right?
Yes. The result of something where the noun is coming into place.
It sounds like a really interesting explanation. I'd have to think about it. Maybe it's correct. But, I'm not joking. Sometimes what people say is correct, but then it's a different way of explaining what I actually have in my head. Yes?
Isn't it because people, boy and man, are alive, like the things, like that are and proposal, picture, and article of things?
But a man can be interesting too, can't he?
Oh yeah. No.
Maybe you're thinking in a too complicated way.
In the first row, the confused people, the frightened boy and the interested man, it says something about the nouns. The people are confused. And in the second, the confusing proposal, the proposal confuses others.
Okay, can we look at the answers? The adjectives describe how we feel. And ing adjectives describe the thing that causes our feelings. Yeah? Sorry. Or we use them to ask about or give an opinion about something. Now this is an important distinction because this mistake is made very often, especially by beginning learners, so people or intermediate learners. People often say, my students have often said, I'm interesting, rather than I'm interested. What they meant was I'm interested, and what they said was I'm interested. Now maybe both are true, but of course you don't want to make that mistake. Or even worse, I'm frightened, I'm frightening rather than I'm frightened. So again, with these things, you might actually already know them in your intuition. Then good for you. But you need to know the explanation. You need to know how to explain this to your students. So here's the rule. ED adjectives describe how we feel, and ING adjectives describe the thing that causes our feelings, or their function is to give an opinion about something or to ask an opinion. Do you think this is interesting? I think this is frightening or boring. Any questions? Yeah.
So this is not going to be about the rules, and you literally have to tell the rules on the paper, but just to apply the rules in, how's this going to look like? Or we have to...
There's always going to be one student during the first lesson who asks, what will the test look like? Now, in the course syllabus on that school, you can find a practice test. I'll explain. I can tell you a little bit about it. There's basically three different things. Three different things on the test. The first one is applying irregular verbs, and you need to just fill in the irregular verbs. The second is giving explanations for rules. And the third one is, the third element is error correction. So you'll see a set of sentences in which you have to find a mistake. If there's a mistake, they might be right or they might be wrong. If there's a mistake, find the mistake and explain, correct it and explain your answer. Yeah? And those are more difficult, of course. But this doesn't mean that you don't need to know the rules for everything, because you can't actually apply them if you don't know the rule. Yeah? So you've got to... what you can expect is we're going to look for sentences or exercises where you actually need to know the rule in order to be able to apply them. Yeah?
There are sample questions in it.
There's sample questions on that school. Yeah. Yeah. Right, so adjectives, ed and ing. Now we've looked at adjectives with nouns and verbs. in front of the verb, after the verb, before the verb, after the verb, ed and ing forms. Next, we'll look at order of adjectives and comparisons, but I think it's time for a break. Last person to sit down, please. Right. So, we talked about adjectives, how they function with nouns and verbs. Next, we'll talk about the order of adjectives. In which order do we use them? Which adjectives come first in the sentence and which come last? After that, we'll talk about how to compare things with adjectives. Okay. Here's a sentence or a phrase with a lot of adjectives, and they're in the wrong order. A new, steel, Italian, curvy, small, red, beautiful car. This is not how we describe this car. Can you, and this is difficult, I must admit, can you try and put the adjectives in the right order? So car obviously comes at the end, and A obviously comes at the beginning, and the bit in between is in the wrong order. So, what's the correct order of the adjectives? Can you try and find this out? This may actually help you to think of smaller bits. So what would come first? Red or small? Then sports and small and red. What would come first? And maybe in that way you can figure it more or less out. So, what's the correct order of these adjectives? Shall we just look at it? I'll just give you the answer. There we go. It's a beautiful, small, curvy, new, red Italian steel sports car. Now, what makes this so difficult is that, of course, you never use the phrase. You never use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 adjectives to describe something. Not in front of a noun, of course. So in reality, it'll be easier to find out what the right order will be. This is the order that we put adjectives in. First, of course, the determiner, or the determiner is another word for something like an article. Then we use the adjective that describes opinion, then size, and shape, then age, then color, then origin, then material, then purpose and type. Now, of course, in reality, you would only use 2 or 3 adjectives like opinion, age, and material. So then you say a beautiful small steel car, or a beautiful small sports car. Yes? In that case, still the order will be opinion, size, purpose. A beautiful small sports car. You can't say the sports beautiful car, small car. Neither can you say a small beautiful sports car. Although I would say that's less dramatic than a beautiful small sports car. I can imagine people saying a small beautiful sports car. But the correct order would be a beautiful small sports car. Of course, it's almost impossible to remember this order, and that's why this acronym might help you. Acronym means if you put the first letter of every word together, then you have a new word. Also kommt. Yeah, so if I'm not in favour of swearing, but if you want to use a good swear word, maybe just if you want to swear anyway, maybe just use this word. It helps. Maybe that helps you remember it. Also kommt. Sounds good, doesn't it? Also kommt.
The acronym is that one of which?
Acronym, no, an acronym is where you put the first letter of every word together, you get a new word. Like, everything that happens in France, like, I can't think of anything.
Yeah, why is
Sorry?
Why is L?
Yeah, yeah. Or Wi-Fi, for example, or yeah, these are acronyms.
Ja, maar er is echt wifi voor.
Wireless something.
Wireless internet.
Now, determine this sort of adjective. Yeah. Okay, so remember, återkomt. Återkomt. Sorry? Opinion, size, shape, origin. Okay, this is a question I get from several people. Where does determiner go? Determiner is not an adjective. Determiner is another word for article. Yeah? Which is not entirely right, but you will learn more about that next year in the next two. A question?
Well, a problem with this is that you get the S's mixed up.
I can't hear your question. Can you quiet down, because I can't hear the question. Psst. Thank you.
The problem with this is that you can get the two S's mixed up.
Yeah, so you just need to remember that size comes before shape. Yeah? Size is more important than shape. No, you're never going to forget I don't know what you love.
Okay, it's not going on.
Okay, I'll show you a video clip. This gives you a break from my voice. Okay, so if you're lazy as a teacher, just find a video clip on YouTube and play it. Okay, here's a video clip which explains the order of adjectives in a really helpful way.
The order of adjectives is one of those wonderful linguistic things that no one... The order of adjectives is one of those wonderful linguistic things that no one really notices until it's pointed out to them. In English, you can have a big red balloon, but not a red big balloon. You can have a proper purple plastic panda, but not a plastic proper purple panda. I mean, you can, but it sounds off, it sounds wrong. There is a rough rule in English that says adjectives should be ordered like this. There are exceptions, of course, particularly important adjectives should be placed next to the noun, but generally, this is how it works. General opinions are words like good or important that could apply to anything. Then you have specific opinions.
So this is almost the same as what I told you, right? So what I said was opinion rather than general and specific opinion, not to make it too difficult. And construction is called material, or construction is called material, and then what's left out here is purpose and type. Yeah, but it's more or less the same. It just depends on what grammar book you use.
Words like delicious that can only apply to certain categories of words. Then size, then shape. It's never a round, large object, it's a large, round object. Then the age, then the colour, then the location it came from, then what it's made of. You can have a blue British wooden box, but not a wooden blue British box. If I say that, it implies that there is a thing called a British box. That's one of the exceptions, by the way, if the noun is two words, like rocking chair, they always go together at the end. Now, this is more of a guideline than a rule. There are plenty of ways to subvert it, and the instinct of many folks is to say, well, just means you're putting the important bits near the end. Except, you aren't. Plus, different languages have different orders. French, for example, puts some, but not all, after the noun. You'd have un grand ballon rouge. Now, I would love to say that I could explain adjective ordering. I wish I could tell you why, in English, you can have that big red balloon, but not a red big balloon. But I have been searching through the literature, and while there are plenty of descriptions of how it works, there is no consensus and, frankly, very few theories about why. But if you want to have a bit of fun with language, try playing about with the order when you write. Sometimes it'll sound clunky, but who knows, you may stumble on something that will live on in, and here's something to confuse you even further, something that will live on in time immemorial.
Okay, so why do we actually say time immemorial, not immemorial time? Does anyone have any idea for that? No, because... Sorry?
Ik ben aan het vloggen.
Okay.
This is the...
I'm teaching. Why can I not find my help? So this is going on for time immemorial. There we go. That's because English grammar worked differently 200, 300, 400 years ago. So in the past, in Shakespeare's time, for example, or before that, English from the Middle Ages had borrowed a lot of words and grammar rules from French. So in English from the Middle Ages, you could say a balloon red, because that's what they did in French. That's probably why we say time immemorial rather than immemorial time. Right. Having said that, here's an exercise. We can use adverbs of degree to make adjectives stronger or weaker. Right? You can say a big balloon, you can also say a very big balloon. You could say a little, a really big balloon, or a rather big balloon. Now what's the difference between these? What is stronger than others? So for example, a fairly big balloon, is that stronger than quite a big balloon? Or is quite a big balloon stronger than a fairly strong balloon? Yeah? So a fairly big balloon. So here are adverbs of degree. Put them in the right order. So when does the balloon become bigger? Right? Extremely big, obviously, is bigger than quite big. What is stronger than others? Yeah?
In a sentence, quite big, you use the determiner after quite.
Yeah, you can't say quite big.
No, I know, but why?
I don't know. That's just what we do. Yeah? The rule will probably be after quite you use a. Yeah? Quite a big. You don't say a quite big. Yeah. Anyway, so can you put these adjectives in the right order? What is weak and what is strong? I'll give you a few minutes for this. Weakest at the bottom of the list is a little, a bit, or slightly. A little, a bit, slightly. Those are the same. Then fairly, then quite. Yeah.
It's really, really bigger than very big.
Very and really are very close. So things that are next to each other, it's very, the border line between them is very thin. So I would say this is an indication that personally, maybe I do make a distinction between very and really, but I'm not very conscious of it. Yeah? So on the test, we're not going to ask you a question like, what is stronger, very or really? No. Yeah? We could actually ask you what is more appropriate here, quite or extremely, or quite or really, yeah? Because these two are very much apart. Rather does come up to quite, rather pretty. Rather and quite are very similar, although rather is slightly stronger, and also rather is usually used in negative contexts. So if I'm in a bus and I'm saying, she drives rather slowly, then I'm not so happy about it. Yeah? Quite is more positive also. He's quite nice. I would say he's rather nice. That doesn't sound very, it sounds a bit sarcastic. He's rather nice. It doesn't sound like I'm really honest. Very, and then he's really nice. And extremely, of course, is the strongest. Please, can you not talk aloud, because it's easy to get distracted during a lecture, but also I always record my lectures. You might have noticed when you watch them, there's a lot of background noise sometimes because people talk all the time. It's an advantage for me because I actually know what people think about my lessons, because I hear it when I'm editing the recordings. I always hear people say, wat moesten we ook weer doen? Ik snap het niet helemaal. So that's one advantage, but if you don't want to be on the recording, then just shut up. Right, okay. So we've talked about adjectives with verbs and nouns. When do they come after a noun, before a noun, when after a verb, ed and ing. We've talked about in which order they come. We've talked about stronger and weaker meanings, and now we'll move to comparisons of adjectives. Okay, this time I'll give you slightly less time because we're running out of time otherwise. Here's another exercise. Can you make these comparative? So, for example, tall, taller, tallest. So if you want to compare something, he is taller than she. How do you do that? Quick, safe, happy, far, hot, low, old, and offensive. Let's look at the answers. What I'm going to do is go through the answers with you, show the explanations, and then at the end I'll make a more general explanation as to the rule. So, it's quick, quicker, and quickest, obviously. Most adjectives, I would say all adjectives are with one syllable, but maybe there's exceptions. There might be one or two exceptions. If an adjective is only one syllable, what we do is add E-R-E-S-T. We know what a syllable is from phonetics. So quick, it's only one syllable. Quicker has two syllables. Quick, there's only one syllable, so this adjective can be made a comparative, a superlative, by adding E-R-E-S-T, like tall, taller, tallest, quick, quicker, quickest. As we will see when we come to offensive, we'll see that doesn't work with offensive. So adjectives that have more than one syllable work differently. We can't say offensive, offensiver. You can in Dutch, but you can't say that in English. You can't say offensive, offensiver, offensivist. That doesn't work. There's a different rule for that. But with one syllable words, or monosyllabic words, we call them E-R-E-S-T. Safe, safer. Safest works exactly the same, but here, be aware that, of course, it already ends in an E, so you can't add ER, you just add an R. Now you don't add an extra E. Safer. Happy, happier, the happiest. Now, this one, this is actually an exception to the rule. I said words which have only one syllable, add ER-EST. Happy has two syllables, happy. Still, you can say happier and happiest. For these ones, this one belongs to an exception to the rule, namely words, and I realize this is not on the sheet, so I'm going to write it down here. This pen doesn't work, this marker, I have one here, where did I leave it? It's words which end in, and this is words with two syllables, and end in LE, like able, ER, can't think of one. OW and Y, I think this is it. These words, when they have two syllables, can have both possibilities. You can either say happy, happier, happiest. You can also say more happy, most happy. Yeah. This is an exception to the rule. So it's just a short adjective, only two syllables, which ends in Y. Change, here you can say happier, happiest. You've got to realize that you change the Y to an I. I see there's a mistake here because the Y here is not a consonant, but it's a vowel. It represents a vowel. Far is either farther or further, farthest and furthest. Both mean the same. We don't say farer, we say farther. Farthest, yeah. Farthest. Yeah. Question from heads. Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Is there a difference in usage between farther and further?
There's no difference between farther and further. Well, there is actually, but no one ever knows. So there's an official rule that one refers to distance and the other one refers to distance in time, I think. But if you ask native speakers of English, no one ever knows. So don't worry about it. Yeah.
I think it was the difference between physical distance and more mental distance.
Yeah, exactly. Physical distance and mental distance. But I've spoken to this about this to native speakers, but no one ever knows the difference. It's not really important. Yeah? This is what we call an irregular adjective. This follows a different set of rules. Can we wait for a few more minutes? We're almost done. Hot, hotter, hottest. Remember here, you add an extra T, otherwise it becomes hotter. Low, lower, lowest, nothing strange about that. Old, older, oldest, or old, elder, eldest. There's no difference in meaning between elder and older. And then finally, offensive. As I said, you can't say offensiver. We say more offensive or most offensive. Likewise, you can say less offensive, least offensive, if you want to put it the opposite way. So, the general rule is this. If an adjective has only one syllable, then we add ER-EST. Tall, taller, tallest, quick, quicker, quickest, low, lower, lowest, nice, nicer, nicest, etc. One syllable, ER-EST. If there's more than one syllable, we add more and most before the word. Offensive, more offensive, most offensive. Extreme, more extreme, most extreme. And there is an exception to the rule. So the background noise. There is an exception to the rule if two-syllable words end in one of these endings, then, and this is in your book as well, this rule, then these words can have either ER, EST, or more and most. Okay. And that's the rule you need to learn. ER, EST, or more or most. All the others are additional rules which you need to look at, read, study. The one you need to learn by heart is monosyllabic words with one syllable, ER, EST. More than one syllable, add more or most. And the exception. And the exception is in your book as well.